Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, as we get you set for the start of the 2024 CFL training camp, preseason, season, all of that. And on today's episode, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Important dates coming up for Argos fans, what you need to know about when it's all happening. We're going to talk about Toronto's new draft class following last night's CFL Draft. Toronto announced today officially that they are going with co-defensive coordinators. We'll talk about how that might work. As well, there are some new additions to the coaching staff, a couple a while ago that we haven't talked about yet. One just added today, so we'll get all that in. And JB and I are both going to talk about a new American player that we are interested in seeing in training camp. We'll pick one each. All that more is coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Before we get into things, I want to tell you about this exciting Pilsner I've got going on in front of me from Something in the Water Brewing. It's called Liberty's Farm to Glass Pilsner, and it's available at both Something in the Water and the LCBO. So you can go pick it up at the LCBO next time you're out there. The idea behind this farm to glass beer is it's made up of ingredients found close to home. In fact, they say that if you use the same recipe but brewed this in a different city with ingredients from there, you'd get an entirely different taste. So this beer uses malt from Pakenham, Ontario, hops from Perth, Ontario, and of course Something in the Water's own house lager yeast. So Something in the Water, they've got so much stuff planned for this season. You got to check out their tap room today in Liberty Village, and make sure you meet us down there on the first day of the regular season for the Toronto Argonauts. We'll be down there at Something in the Water celebrating the return of the Argonauts for 2024. And we got a lot of details on that coming up over the next few weeks. All right, JB, let's get to things. And I guess maybe we'll start off with the important dates, because what I love, actually, I don't know if I love it. I guess I love it because of the momentum, but I was talking yesterday on the draft show that I did with JC Abbott, just how ridiculously fast everything happens. You got the draft yesterday, and training camp starts in a week. Like rookie minicamp starts in a week, and before you know it, it's preseason, regular season. Is this too quick for you? Like, would you prefer there were a hiatus like in the NFL, or do you like that it's just go?
No, I love it.
Do you?
I love
do.
it. I hate the downtime. I like once I'm kind of gearing myself up and then getting re-engaged and reacquainted, that we're jumping right into it, that there isn't now 4 months of pretend practice camp and imaginary stories, that we are into exhibition games in a month.
Well, it certainly makes our job easier. There's no question about that. But I think in terms of like drafting rookies, it's so difficult. Like, these rookies that got drafted last night, they just found out last night where they got to be in a week for potentially the rest of the year, right? Like they just found out, oh, I'm off to Toronto, and they got a week to get to Toronto, get set up for practice, and they may not leave Toronto until mid-November. So to me it's odd that way. And the disadvantage for the CFL is that you don't have any time to really prep those rookies. We often talk about how there aren't typically a lot of rookie starters out of the CFL draft. One of the reasons is, like in the NFL, the draft happens last week, but now they have months to get ready for the regular season. And so that is a little different for the CFL rookies. So they're kind of up against it a little bit time-wise. It's not really fair, but for fans, for us, it's a pretty exciting way of doing things. So rookie camp begins May 8th. So that's a week today, week tomorrow, week today. And then by May 11th, CFL teams need to reduce their roster to 85 players. That's not usually a huge cut. They're usually floating somewhere in the mid-90s at that point. But that cut often kind of takes care of itself. And then training camp officially begins on May 12th. And then 2 days later, and this is a tougher one, 2 days later, the rosters have to be reduced to 75. It's still not a massive cut down, but you got 2 days to kind of figure out, okay, well, these 10 guys aren't gonna make it work. And then after that, it's preseason time. Saturday, May 25th, Toronto at Montreal for preseason game 1, 7:30 p.m. start. And then Friday, May 31st, a little less than a week later, Hamilton at Toronto, although that game is going to be at Guelph at Alumni Stadium, 7:30 p.m. What do you think of having the home preseason game at Alumni Stadium in Guelph?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't love it.
Why
I have
not?
to
Like,
say.
but why don't you?
Well, I'd rather not go to Guelph.
Yeah, but I know. Well, but aside
It's
from, yeah, I would like
not,
I'd
not
like
a,
if the stadium were in my backyard and I could just go
yeah.
outside
Well,
and yes, but
I mean, I don't know. It's not really that
so
complicated,
the hour drive to Guelph is too much for
Yeah,
you.
and then the hour drive back. Yeah, I'd rather not go to Guelph, but
It's like an hour drive to the east end of Toronto.
it feels different. Those, not those. It's city miles, not highway miles. But no, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, it's fine. There is something. There is something kind of I don't say charming, but I guess it is. Like when you're out there and you're kind of separate from the city, and it has a different feel than once you get into the regular season. So I do like that. I do like that. And when you go to Guelph, it has the feel of camp, of it being not necessarily a professional game being played in a professional stadium. So there is that kind of nice vibe to it that I do enjoy after the drive.
Yeah, yeah, once you've got that drive out of the way, and usually it's me that drives, isn't it? You just sit there in the
Yeah.
passenger seat. So
Well, I mean, still.
okay, so I like it. I think there's a I don't know, field of dreams element of it to me to see a professional football game on this sort of small field. Not that it's tiny, and I love Guelph's facilities. I love their stadium. I think it's a great place to watch a game. So yeah, me personally, I enjoy that a lot.
So
And then
remember last year I asked you, "Is this heaven?" And you said, "No, it's Guelph."
I don't think that happened. Then week 1 of the regular season, the Argos do not open with a week 1 bye this year, which is a relief. So
Oh,
week
what?
1 of the regular season, Sunday, June 9th, they do open with a Sunday night game. Sunday, June 9th, 7 p.m., BC at Toronto, right into the fire off week 1. So those are the important dates coming up. So again, rookie minicamp May 8th, cutdowns May 11th, training camp officially starts May 12th, cutdowns May 14th. And then preseason game 1, May 25th, that's away. Preseason game 2, May 31st, that's home, but in Guelph. And then Sunday, June 9th, at BMO Field, 7 p.m. against the BC Lions. Those are all your important dates.
Yeah, I'm excited for our annual season predicting.
So last night, it was the 2024 CFL Draft. If you missed it, you didn't get to watch it at all. For Three Down Nation, JC Abbott and I did a 4-hour-long, non-bathroom break, continuous analysis show where we talked about every single draft pick. You don't necessarily need to go back and watch all 4 hours, but if you want to look at sort of in real time the Argos picks as they came up, that is available on the Three Down Nation YouTube channel. You can check that out. It was really fun to do that, but it's hectic and chaotic. And once you get into that third round, the picks just start flying, and we were going at 100 miles an hour. You watched the TSN feed for the first couple of rounds. What did you take out of that? How did that go? Because I haven't had a chance to see that yet. I've recorded it. I will go watch it. But yeah, what was the TSN feed like?
Good. I mean, I've sort of registered my hope on how it could go forward differently. But I thought the TSN guys were very well, very knowledgeable. They had some really strong opinions. The draft does go by pretty quickly. It's a different, it's a distinctly Canadian flavored event in contrast to the Las Vegas motorcycle firing flamethrowers over a fountain of wine that the NFL draft is. So it is very humble, but that is for sure one of the things that I enjoy about the CFL. And it's always great to see the guys back again, and it's great to see how much. I thought it was really nice to see how there still is this energy from TSN to continue to broadcast it, which is not necessarily locked in stone. And then the commissioner, touched on the Chad Kelly investigation and referenced the idea of waiting to comment upon it until it was completed. And that's certainly the take that you and I are looking to do as well, because we don't get into anything without all of the information. But it was a good podcast, and as also, Marshall Ferguson is a font of information.
Yeah, no, his note taking is pretty absurd. It's fun. Like when I was at the combine in Winnipeg, all of those guys are obviously there, and they're taking notes. We've all been taking notes since the youth sports season ended, and basically in February it amps up a little bit. Then we get to the combine, but yeah, we're all exchanging stories, exchanging notes, exchanging feedback, and yeah, you're not going to find many guys more prepared than Marshall. He really puts in time. He loves his note taking, but all those guys, they're all CFL, the CFL Brain Trust. Like they know everything that's going on in the league, and so yeah, really good resource. And hopefully you're able to get something out of what JC and I provided as well on the 3 Down Nation video pod. But yeah, JC really impressed me so much with his knowledge. He knew he was ahead of me, because there were a couple of picks in that 8th round, which we got to that last round, that I barely knew the names of. Those last like 3 or 4 guys. He was only stumped once, and it was on the very last pick, the 74th pick of the draft, where he knew nothing, I knew nothing, and we just kind of like, well, it's a DB from Laval, and that's all we got. But for him to have been 73 to 74, I think I was like 71 of 74. That's not bad. We'll take that. So let's get into the Argos picks. Round 1. It did not go the way that I thought it would. It started the way I thought it would. Joel DeBlanco getting taken first overall by Edmonton. It made too much sense. But I really thought that Kevin Mittal would go to Ottawa because they clearly need a receiver. They instead go Nick Mardner, which is a little bit more risky a pick, I think. And because of the way the draft order was set up, nobody with that huge need at receiver, the Argos end up with Kevin Mittal, who some people felt was the best, and a lot of people felt was the second best player in the draft. What was your reaction when you saw him fall to 5?
Yeah, amazing. I didn't think there was any chance that we were going to get him. It's interesting, that Ottawa went with the potentially higher ceiling player, or at least maybe the more highlight likely player. That'll be an interesting comparison, moving forward as to, which was the correct choice. Yeah, I mean, the Argos plugged in a day 1 starter. And I mean, I think when you can do that in the CFL draft, that is, that is an incredible accomplishment.
The other option they had, and I'll talk about Mittal a little bit more in a second, but the other option they had was Jeffrey Canton-Arcou, linebacker out of Memphis. He was sitting there at 5 as well. And this would have been a big shift in what they were going to do. I think probably they got there and they're like, well, this is a no-brainer. This is Kevin Mittal. I don't think they felt he would slide to 5. That would be my guess. But if they had decided to go Canton-Arcou, it could have shifted things, because you've got Wyndham McManus, Jonathan Jones, both of whom are probably better suited to that will spot. And so now you could, if you really wanted to, work towards getting Canton-Arcou and Cassar as your middles, and kind of figure that out from the middle spot, make that spot Canadian. It does open up possibilities, and then you can go to that 3-4 look on second and long situations where you bring in Jones, and now you've got Jones, McManus, and either Canton-Arcou or Cassar out there, as well as the Sam. So there were possibilities, but that really would have shifted what the defense looked like. And I don't know if that was something they were prepared to do, but they must have been thrilled with Kevin Mittal, because like you said, he's ready to go. He's got the pro body, pro size, pro strength, pro speed. His measurables were elite at the combine. His movement, his strength, and in every one-on-one drill, in every rep of Skelly, every rep of team, it was Kevin Mittal wide open. He just is a great route runner. He blocks extremely well. You just won't find a lot of negatives to his game. And so to be able to plug him in with the Canadians that the Argos already have on the roster, I think is pretty exciting. So I can't wait to see him out there. He's going to be starting sooner rather than later. He's that ready to go. They didn't have a second round pick. They have 3 third round picks. This is where it got kind of interesting. So Tyson Hergott out of Waterloo. I love that pick too. So he's a defensive lineman, and they can do a lot with him. With his 6'3", 246 size. It's enough size from an end position that you feel pretty comfortable sending him on twists and stunts. He's just a hard-hitting, sure tackling kind of guy. He's not going to be plug and play like Matal. He's not going to be out there starting right away or anything like that. But he should be able to work onto the field very soon, and he's got really nice athleticism. So you feel pretty comfortable out there, and he'll do his share of specials as well while he acclimates himself to CFL play. But that's a nice addition, because you talked about it last week. This is not a position where they've got a ton of Canadians. That defensive line room just got a lot better with the addition of Tyson Hergott.
Yeah, I mean, he checks a lot of boxes, and I think it was a nicely timed. I thought that he might have gone a little bit earlier. I'm sure they were really happy to get him there in the third.
Yeah, I had him projected earlier than that, and so he just kept sliding. I'm like, this is going to be great for someone. It ended up being great for the Toronto Argonauts. The other guy in the third round that I thought could have gone earlier too, and just to give you an indication of it, when John Hodge and JC Abbott did our mock draft a few days ago, this player was taken in the second round, and here Toronto was mid-third round taking him. That's John Bose from Calgary. So he's also similar to, actually, I'll step that back. Not quite as play ready maybe as Tyson Hergott, but John Bose has a higher ceiling than so many of these draft prospects from yesterday. Bose is not going to step in there right away and be a starter, but the Toronto Argonauts don't need that. They've got their entire line back from last year. 4 of those guys are signed long term. What Bose is, though, is he's tremendous potential. He played tackle at Calgary. He has the possibility of playing guard, moving inside, but I don't think they need to do that yet. And maybe another year of school would be the perfect thing for a guy like Bose. I don't know, or practice roster and kind of learning the ropes. But either way, he needs a little bit more development time, and I would not give up on tackle because he's got the measurables to do it. So he's 6'4", 335, and he's got 36-inch arms, which is an absurd arm length. Just this massive wingspan, and he doesn't quite know what to do with them yet, like how to use it. He uses them now in recovery. When he gets beat, he'll use that reach and steer guys clear of the quarterback. But he'll eventually learn to use those arms as a weapon. And I just love his attitude. I love his coachability. We talked about him on our pre-draft pod because he was a guy that really intrigued me. So I was thrilled for the Argos when they were able to land John Bose. He will be a starter in this league. It won't be this year, but he will be at some point, and that's going to give Toronto some options. But you love guys like this, right? If you can afford to take a guy that just has the measurables, not quite there yet, this is what you should do if you're the Argos, right?
Yeah, it's the reward you get for being successful in the draft over a stretch, is that it's one of the things that can make it so hard for teams that are not as successful to catch up, is because it's almost like the rich get richer. When you're lucky enough to have a pretty deep roster, you can fold guys in and pick guys with higher ceilings because you don't need them to play right away. Where, if you're Ottawa or Edmonton, you need guys that can play right away. You can't really risk taking chances, or there's going to be another coach and another general manager, and so you don't pick people that the Argos or Winnipeg have the luxury of choosing. And in a lot of ways, like you look at Toronto and Winnipeg's drafts, and there's similar makeup of players. There were guys that Winnipeg took that I had my eye on.
Yeah, no, exactly that. I know. And I know the guys you're talking about too. Is all like round 2 was the Winnipeg round with 4 picks. Round 3 was the Toronto round with 3 picks. But yeah, it's a similar kind of position. If you're in a good spot, then yeah, you can take some home run swings, which are fun, and that's what he is. Their last pick of the third round, Taon Blackburn out of Alberta, defensive back, big defensive back, 6'2", over 6'2", 203, great size, great length. This is another player who's not going to be able to contribute positionally right away, but he is going to be able to contribute immediately on special teams. He's got that size. There were two kind of elite DBs in this class, both of whom went early. Ben LaBrosse went fourth overall. And Bullion in a little bit later. But Taon Blackburn, while he isn't as positionally ready as those guys might be, and honestly, I'm not even sure if those guys are going to be able to start right away. I don't think they are. Blackburn's not either. He needs some more time. There's some parts of his game that are ready, but you don't want to throw him out there yet. But he can get in almost immediately on specials, like I said. And you brought up something when we were chatting earlier today. You brought up the fact that this is a pretty nice replacement in terms of special teams contributions for Trevor Hoyt.
Yeah, I mean that's what it looked like to me. It looked like in the third round they loaded up on a couple of terrific athletes who at the very least you can plug right in, and they are going to they're going to fly down the field, and they're going to be sure tacklers, and I think they make for great special teamers, and he was. I mean, Hoyt is a loss for sure. He was a very dependable special team player. He was that is a hole for the Argos to fill that wouldn't necessarily make the cover of the Toronto Sun.
Yeah, and I think Blackburn's the right guy to try and do that, because you look at that size, and while he may not be positionally ready at like 6'2", 6'3", and 203, when you can run as fast as he can, you put down a 6.9 3-cone as well. He's got mobility. He's got movement. What he's missing is recognition. Like as a defensive back, that's what he's missing is recognition. The other stuff will come when the recognition gets there, and that's going to come through reps and time. And certainly, if he's on the dress roster as a special teams player, he's going to get those reps in practice, and he'll get better and better. And maybe he's a contributor by the end of the season. Certainly, I think there's a possibility for him being able to contribute next year as a positional player as well as a special teams star. We'll go a little more quickly for the rest of the picks because, again, they're guys that are interesting. There's a lot to say about, but we've covered a lot of this already, so I don't want to get caught repeating ourselves too much. Jarrell Cummings was next up, 5'9", 188 as a DB. For me, he's got great cover skill once he engages. I like him. I like him basically in a man spot. Press man is where he's best. He's most comfortable there when he can sort of dictate what's going to go on. It gets a little bit more dicey when he's playing off. Sometimes there are some issues playing zone, but if you're going to go in if you're going to put him out there right now, you'd be pretty desperate, and he's not going to be out there right away. The Argos know that. They're not drafting for that, but he is a guy that I think they're looking at as a positional player for the future. I don't think they're going to put him in right away. I'd be surprised if he was in right away on special teams. I don't think that's what he's there for. I think the plan with him is in time, maybe he develops into a positional playing player, because he's got some of those ability, the cover ability, the physical ability. The next couple of guys, next two guys actually were guys that we both coached against. So Afena Onyeka from Carleton, defensive lineman, Anim Dana, who was both offensive line and defensive line when we had to coach against him. But these guys are so much fun to watch. We'll talk about Onyeka first out of Carleton. 6'1", 250. Just again, always since he was born, was surprisingly fast for his size. Just one of those guys that doesn't look like he should be able to move that well. He's got terrific reach. He's also got great balance and body control. He's able to get around the edge. He goes one of those guys that goes like fully horizontal when getting around the edge. He's so fast with that, and that opens up the gap. He's able to come back inside too and cause all sorts of problems. And he uses those long arms to trip guys up. Where he gets into trouble is if he gets locked up, he can get taken right out of a play. And so for him, that's going to be something to work on his strength, to work on his play strength, to work on his ability to shed blocks. And if he can pick that up, there are options, but he's a guy that could be special teams right away. So I like that pick, and I'm glad it's the rest of the CFL that has to go against him and not you or I.
Yeah.
And then, and you know what this like?
It's always an interesting conversation too about do you want to take players from a region? Would you prefer to bring in players, who don't live in a region with family and friends and connections? Like, would you rather them kind of have to come and be football only, or do so it is an interesting conversation that they clearly, are happy to take GTA guys for the Argos.
Yeah, there's a bunch, right? They've done that pretty consistently. This management group, right? Like since they took over at the end of 2019, has been all for that and taking guys from Mississauga, guys from Brampton, guys from Toronto, and they continue to do it in this draft with these back-to-back picks. Anim Dana, 6'8", 353 out of Howard. He's just a giant man, a left tackle who kind of has a lot of that giant man stereotype, both good and bad. So, there's some movement questions, for example, but there's a real possibility of him being able to play tackle at that size. He's with the Philadelphia Eagles right now. He signed a UDFA contract with them. So again, this isn't an immediate need, but at some point, if he ends up coming up to the CFL, Toronto's got him. And with that kind of, you don't find that kind of guy, like 6'8", 353 and can move around, has good power, all that stuff. You just don't find it. And so maybe this is in a couple of years. Maybe this is the next Ryan Hunter. You have to see how that works out. But at some point, if he ends up in the CFL, Toronto will be more than happy to welcome him into camp. So it won't be this year, but down the road. The next pick, Justin Sambu from Baylor. He was an interesting one because he kind of like it just fell off this past season. He was at Maine for 4 seasons and looked fantastic as, he moved all over the line. He was defensive end, 3-tech nose. He was all over the place, 6'2", 282. He goes to Baylor and barely sees the field. This is a guy that got more and more snaps each year at Maine and then only 39 total snaps in 2023. I think it's because they looked at him as a bit of a tweener, and that can really kill you in the American game. In the CFL, there's so many more possibilities for you. And at 6'2", 282, I think you can find a spot to plug him in. I think he can come in and play nose. I think that's going to be where they look at him. And again, another guy that can bolster that defensive line. Not a guy that I'm looking at right away, but I think he's probably, unless he's just completely fallen off and having been not out of football, but not getting that kind of playing time, I think he's going to be able to plug in pretty quickly. So I'm excited to see him in camp and see what he looks like. That's an exciting one. Anytime you get an athlete at 6'2", 282, those are fun to watch. And then the last pick of the draft, Daniel Shin from Alberta, a center. 2 stories on this guy. His film grade I loved. I really was excited to go see him at the combine because on film he looked really good to me. Just a nasty center that wanted to punish defenders, and he was a cog in that machine that was the Alberta ground game this past season. Why the Golden Bears were so successful on the ground. They had a few guys, but Shin was one of the leaders in that unit. But then at the combine, it didn't look like I was looking at the same guy. His testing numbers weren't good. He ran an 8-second 3-cone, for example. I think it was a 5.82 40, if I'm not mistaken. And in one-on-ones, he was getting beat again and again by global players, by the other guys at the combine, and that's just not what I saw on tape. And so I'm assuming that from his interview that the team was able to conduct, they got to the bottom of what was going on there, kind of found out, you know what, I think the real Daniel Shin is the guy that we're seeing on film. And if that's the case, then it is more than worth an 8th round pick. In fact, it's huge value at that stage. So yeah, bring him in, see what he looks like once you get him out on the field, and maybe he takes a year to get ready.
And don't run that 40-yard play that you were going to run with him.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah. Don't go deep, Daniel Shin. But it was more than that. Even the one-on-ones, though, it just didn't look like him. Like he looked like a really good blocker on film, and it just, for whatever reason, that wasn't there. And I don't know why. I don't have the answer to that because he just didn't look like the same guy. So I'm excited to see him in camp, see which Daniel Shin we're going to get, and if it's the one that was playing at Alberta, then the Argos got a steal of a draft pick. JB, co-defensive coordinators. It's been reported for a while. Mike Mitchell reported it a long time ago, over a month ago. He first reported it. I didn't see anyone else with it out there. And then today, the Argos put out a press release confirming that, yes, in fact, Kevin Iben, William Fields will be your co-defensive coordinators for 2024. Thoughts, JB?
Well, first blush, I'm not crazy about it. Now, they have had, a very kind of collective identity on the defense in Toronto. Coach Mace was the coordinator, but it was a group. I think they do enjoy that idea of a group working together. That strikes me as where this comes from. Having a couple of different defensive back coaches working together and it not being so cult of personality, if you will, or so reliant on the one person. Obviously, one of them is going to have to be the play caller. If you don't want to call him the defensive coordinator, I guess that's fine. I don't mind separating linebacker play. I don't mind separating like front seven play from the defensive backfield play. Although they are related, they are more separate maybe than people realize. And so I think that it makes sense to have a coordinator for both because they are very different, right? Like you're looking at different skill sets, different understanding, different things you want to focus upon. Of course, you'd like one coordinator for it all. But yeah, I mean, I agree and I disagree. I mean, I agree that you definitely can divide a defense into two, like the front and the back. And if you have two guys that you feel really work together, then I mean, the Coen brothers directed a lot of great films, and nobody thought two brothers could direct films together. So there's my football answer, the Coen brothers.
Yeah, and you hope that's what it is. I'm with you. I don't like it on paper, but I understand why, and I see it. I don't like it because I've been involved in staffs like that where it's really tough sometimes, and especially like some of the arrangements that we've had with guys coming and going and things like that at the semi-pro level, especially where too many different voices can sometimes be confusing, and players don't like it and can get confused. And so, what I would suggest here, and I'm sure this is not just like they're like, hey, why don't we try this? They've thought this through. This is obviously a plan, but they have to make sure that the communication coming from coaches to players is consistent. That's the most important thing. It's got to be the same message and it's got to be the same answers. You can't have you can't have any lack of communication there. You can't have any disagreements there. It's all got to be one voice, even if it's coming from two different guys. And I think the advantage here is that you've got two guys that have now worked together in a system that's probably going to be very similar to what we saw with the Corey Mays system, because that would make the most sense to me. And so they've already got the answers to the questions, and now they're just going to implement it and maybe add their own style to it.
And I like the idea, I love the idea of two coaches who are, confident enough that neither needs to have the title. As well, it takes away the dynamic of like, well, you're the defensive coordinator. Why are you asking me questions all the time about what we should do? Why don't you tell me what we should do? So, that if you have that sort of like, we're in this together and we're going to plan it together. I love the idea. It's very antithetical to traditional football, and I love that too. So, let's go. I've come around on it. I'm behind it.
In like the last 10 minutes, you're like, nope, I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm not yet. I want to see it. I've had bad experiences. I want to see it work. I'm not saying it can't. And I think these are the right guys. I love both these coaches, like Kevin Iben and William Fields, both great coaches, both great personalities too. And I can totally see them being able to gel and get along. They're communicators, right? They're both intelligent communicators, and that's going to go a long way in making this dynamic work. So I think a lot of people are watching. And like you, I'm all for unconventional, and we'll talk about that. That can transition into our next segment, the new additions to coaching staffs. Let's talk about the new running backs coach for the Toronto Argonauts, because this is an unconventional thing that is becoming more and more common. So we got Dominic Picard, who played 3 seasons with the Argos, 2009 through 2011, and then around the league. He's been coaching since 2016 as an offensive lineman, former offensive lineman. He got a lot of time in coaching the offensive line before moving up the coaching chain, and was most recently at Les Verts et Or de l'Université de Sherbrooke. And now, of course, he comes back to Toronto. He was well loved when he played here. But as an offensive lineman, former offensive line coach, I love it as a running backs coach, because to me, the most important coaching points and the hardest coaching points to get across to running backs sometimes all stem from the construction of the run game and also pass protection. And no one understands that better than offensive linemen. So for me, it's a natural fit, but still a little unconventional.
It is unconventional. His resume is of a coach who will be a teacher. That he coached in CJEP. He coached at Sherbrooke. He's not he doesn't have a lot of professional or any professional coaching experience. He hasn't dealt with those egos. I mean, he was a professional athlete, but his resume is certainly one of somebody who is there to teach. I think that's really interesting to see how he gels with the offensive line coach, and hopefully, because sometimes offensive line coaches are on the same page, and sometimes they're not. So that'll be an interesting gel question, because I agree with you. I think it's a very interesting thing. I don't think that Kerry needs somebody to teach him how to 3-point the ball or do sort of fundamental stuff that if you're looking at, here's how we want you to read this play, that's kind of more interesting to me as a running back coach, that you're more into the running back and the line working together than you are on working on running back fundamentals with a veteran.
Yeah, and it's less fundamentals for sure, but I think you and I both agree, like at this level, like once you get as a running back in the CFL, that fundamental stuff. And so the pass protection to me is the most important thing a running back does. If you can't pass protect, I'm not that interested in you as a running back unless you're just an absolute star with the ball in your hands. I would rather you be an efficient pass protector. There's no one better to teach you than an offensive lineman. So I like that move. And then the other one, Demetrius Maxey, D-Max, who played several seasons with the Argos, late 90s to early 2000s. Oh, no, there was a hiatus in there and he came back again. Won a couple Grey Cups with the Argos, of course. He's been coaching for 15 years, the last 8 of which were in Edmonton with the Elks. As a linebackers coach, and then most recently as a defensive line coach. And he is going to come in and coach that defensive line. I love this. He's just, a high energy guy, an intelligent guy. He fits into this room the same way that all these guys do. Everyone that works with Coach Dinwiddie and his staff, the number one thing is always intelligence. It's always bringing in bright guys who understand what they're doing. He's another example of that, and has a little bit bigger a resume certainly than Coach Picard does, but another former Argo that fans are familiar with too. So that's kind of a nice. I like when they bring guys home like that. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, defensive line in professional football is not a job for the for the weak of heart, or the meek, or it is not. You have to be. Well, I remember once being described that you have to be like sort of yeah, the personalities in the defensive line room need a coach. I think exactly like D-Max. I think that he is perfect, because what you're talking about here is not necessarily intellectualizing in the way that sometimes offensive line does, but what you're talking about is the violence in the game. That the defensive line are bringing. an aggressiveness and a physicality that isn't there in some of the other positions, and so therefore it's going to be a different group of men in that room, different priorities, different things that are going to energize them for the game, and I'm really excited. He has coming from Edmonton. I think that makes sense to bring him over. I think that's a really nice fit, and I'm really excited to see what he does with depleted but still a pretty impressive group of men.
Oh, I don't know, like depleted. I think it's just different.
Maybe
Like,
depleted is too
yeah, that's
strong.
not the
I
right
agree.
word because you just brought in
Changed.
Jake Serezna and you got Flo out there. Like this
Yeah, I
group
mean
is
the
ready to
Sarezda
go.
connection's terrific, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's all sorts of good stuff there. I think the connections too. And that's not a that's not a coaching position where you want to bring in, like, unlike running back with an offensive line coach, I don't think that works in the defensive line room. You bring in I would never suggest bringing in like a DB coach to be the defensive line
No,
coach.
it's not an interchangeable position on the ladder up. It is I think like offensive line, like you are born that or you are not.
Yeah, and these guys, you got to get your guys ready to go to battle. So it's just a different thing. And the new coach that was signed today, Myron Lewis, this is kind of a fun one. So Myron Lewis was hired as the new defensive backs coach. Now, of course, Coach Ivan's still going to be working with the linebackers. Coach Fields still going to be working in the secondary. New defensive back coach, Myron Lewis, he's got a really interesting resume. He's, I first time in the professional ranks as a coach. His path started at Vanderbilt. He ended up being drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, third round, I believe, spent a few seasons in Tampa Bay, ended his career with the BC Lions, Edmonton Elks, and then got right into coaching. His most recent coaching experience, there's an Argo tie there too, and I'm sure that's where he came from. He was at Best Academy in Atlanta, and that, of course, was the high school of Qantas Stiggers. And you can totally understand why the Argos staff would be looking around. Here you've got Qantas Stiggers, who's only ever played high school ball and then a few weeks with fan control football. And he came into camp last year with so much knowledge, so much that had been taught to him. And you're like, where did you get all this information having only played high school ball? Well, here's the answer. Myron Lewis. Let's get that guy in here and see if he can turn into just an elite DB coach. If he's able to do that with a guy like Stiggers, what can he do over the long haul coaching your organization from training camp all the way through to the end? So,
And,
I'm
a
excited.
moment of, I don't want to say a moment of silence, but certainly a moment for Stiggers who has gone off and met his dreams, and fantastic video that's out there of the Jet draft room talking to him, and really just an amazing story. And so fantastic for him, who, by all accounts is just a great individual.
Oh, he's the best. He's the nicest guy. You couldn't find a nicer guy, and he was just so excited to be part of everything last year. I love that about him. And like we said right away, first day of training camp, we're like, this guy's going to the NFL. There was no question about it in either of our minds. I was actually surprised how late he went in the draft. And the Jets got to get a steal there in the fifth round with Stiggers. He's a day two talent. He's a guy that will be a starting corner in the NFL. And so to get him that late, I thought was huge for the Jets. But yeah, unfortunately for Argos fans, Stiggers is not coming back. But at least you can watch him on Sundays for the New York Jets. So that's something else to cheer for. And if there was ever a reason to buy a New York Jets jersey, and I'm not sure there ever was, but now there is if you get Stiggers written on the back of it. All right, JB, there's a lot of new American players on this squad. Training camp's about to begin. One of the most exciting things, first day of training camp, I love sitting down with you, looking at our giant roster with 500 names on it. We're trying to figure out who's who. There are multiple numbers. There's two of like everything. They got so many guys in there. And all these American players, many of whom we've never heard of before. You've looked through this list. Who are you most excited about seeing a new American player in training camp?
Yeah, and mine is not like kind of a hipster pick.
Mine is
In
another.
terms of looking for like a deep cut. Like, look, mine remains Derek Parish. He's drafted by Jacksonville. Interestingly, he was drafted by Jacksonville as a fullback. So it speaks to his agility and athleticism. because he will not be a fullback in the CFL. I'm really excited to see his speed and power. I think that he is the perfect example of a guy who has elite athleticism, but simply doesn't have superhuman NFL measurables. And that's what the CFL is made of, is elite athletes who, are not built with preposterous size. And I think he's going to be a star. I think that coach is going to be so happy to have him in the room, and I just want to see that first step. I want to see him flash. We talk about, like, when you go to camp, like Stiggers last year. There's no look. It's no different. Honestly, I know we always talk about how it's no different than high school, but it's just not. Like, stars flash immediately. It's not like 3 games in, you're like, oh, this guy is, like, immediately in Indy, in one-on-one drills, in walking on the field. Stars flash, and I'm really, really excited to see him. I think he's going to be a star, and I'll know in 25 odd seconds.
Yeah, and I think we'll see it right away too, just like we have with so many other guys. It'll jump off the page. So for me, it's another guy that we thought right away as soon as he signed, like, oh, this guy's going to be interesting, and that's Marquise Waters. Let me tell you a little bit about Marquise Waters, why I'm excited about him. Number one, constant learning. I love when you watch film on a guy year over year, you look, okay, well, let's take a look at his freshman film. Let's take a look at his sophomore film. This is a guy that played at Duke for 4 seasons and got better every single season and got more and more involved in the defense every single season. He ended up with 2 extra years of eligibility through, well, it's a combination of redshirting and COVID years. So many guys now coming into the league a little bit older. So he ends up at Texas Tech for the last 2 seasons, and you saw that continued growth. The first year at Texas Tech, he wasn't used as an every down player, but he still put out good film and did some impressive things, and then was dominant in his last year. The 2022 season, not this past year, but in 2022 was just lights out as a run defender, as a pass defender, and he was all over the secondary. The most exciting thing for me is positionally where he was used. Watching his film, I couldn't find him half the time. I'm like, where is he? Because he was always in a different spot. He's lined up. They have him at Texas Tech. He was mostly used as like a nickel corner, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. Every different team has a different name for that position. But what you think of as a nickel corner, or maybe as a halfback in the CFL, that was largely his job. But you would find him all over the field. He'd be lined up in the box as a linebacker. He'd be lined up on the line of scrimmage, being sent as a blitzer, or just mugging and bailing out into deep coverage. He's got the speed to get out there. But to me, he screams Sam linebacker, and I know the Toronto Argonauts have other plans at the Sam linebacker spot right now. I think it's going to be tough when you see him on the field and what he can do. You're going to be looking around at each other as a coaching staff, say, we need to get Marquise Waters on the field here, and Sam may be the best spot to do it. So I can't wait to watch him at camp and to see those coaches' eyes widen as they see some of the stuff that he can do. Well, JB, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Lots of exciting things coming up. We're going to be talking about training camp really soon. We've got positional groups to break down. We want to go through this squad and say who are the guys that the Argos are going to be going to bat with this year. Who are they depending on? What can we predict? What can we forecast? We're going to have some preseason power rankings coming up as well. Lots of stuff to look forward to. In the meantime, make sure you get down to Something in the Water. Try out some of that beer. Try out this Pilsner that I've been enjoying here, because there's nothing like a locally brewed Pilsner like this, the Liberty Farm to Glass Pilsner. Try that out. Find it at the LCBO. But like I said, I'm excited. I couldn't be more excited that it is finally CFL season, JB.
I am also excited for you to be buying me those drinks that I will not allow you to forget that you owe me.
Yes, I owe you a flight of Something in the Water beer. We will do that. Maybe opening day is the day for that, because we'll be down there for that. We're gonna put in some videos too. Maybe that's not the day for it, actually, because I've got to go in and work. So maybe that's not the day to do it. We'll find a time to do your flights of Something in the Water beer. But for JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Fight to